Capes on the Couch podcast is for entertainment purposes only. Dr. Issues is a psychiatrist, but he is not your psychiatrist and does not have knowledge of your individual situation. For any personal mental health concerns, please consult your own healthcare providers. For medical emergencies, please call 911 or the designated number in your area immediately. Remember that you are not alone and help is out there.
Hello and welcome to Capes on the Couch, where comics get counseling. I'm Anthony Sitko.
And I'm Dr. Issues.
This is issue 107, Catwoman. The thing I love about this show is the fact that we're over 100 episodes in, and we still have such big name characters to cover. Like Catwoman.
Yeah.
Catwoman is a big name.
Yeah. That should tell you, that really should tell you that we're barely scratching the surface.
Yes. We have not yet dug our claws into every single character. Oh, the fur and the puns are going to fly fast and furious in this episode. Before we dive into Ms. Kyle, without going into too much detail, because we do want to leave some stuff as a surprise, we are asking all of our fans, anybody who's listening to this episode, to send us a voice recording that we will use in an episode. Obviously, if you're sending it to us, you're giving us permission to use it in an episode. But your thoughts on Batman and what he means to you, memories you have of the character, favorite stories, anything that when you hear Batman, whatever you want to talk about, and send us the MP3 or the voice recording, whatever file you choose to use, and send it to us at capesonthecouch@gmail.com, because in a couple of weeks, we are going to be announcing something big that we've got working on, but we want to start compiling all of your fan comments. So this is really, this episode is that we're envisioning, again, without giving too much away, is largely going to be really what the fans have to say. So whatever your thoughts on Batman are, get them down, talk into your phone. The quality doesn't matter. And email us at capesonthecouch@gmail.com. And we will, we're going to make something special out of it, because we've got some big plans coming up. But before we get into Bruce, let's talk about his on again, off again paramour, Catwoman Selina Kyle. So she was created by Bill Finger and Bob Kane in Batman #1, spring of 1940. Originally known as the Cat, she was a jewel thief who disguised herself as an old woman until she was captured by Batman. And so she would go on to be a sort of recurring nemesis for several years until the comics code really tamped down on how women could be presented in comics. And so a evil villain like Catwoman really didn't meet the code standards. I really, really dislike the comics code, but thankfully we don't have it anymore. So she resurfaced as a major player in 1987. Batman Year One by Frank Miller really revamped her origin, and she was originally working as a prostitute for a pimp named Stan, and she was working with a young girl, Holly Robinson. And so they encounter Batman one night, and after Holly stabs him, Selina fights him but gets knocked out. And so they decide to start burgling the rich. They leave prostitution and they decide, we're just going to steal from the rich. And so Selina gets rescued by Bruce after robbing Carmine Falcone, who is a big player in the Gotham underground. He was in the Batman, the Christopher Nolan trilogy. Carmine Falcone is the mob boss, and so Selina robbed him, and he didn't take too kindly to that. So Catwoman gets her own solo series in 1989 that really expands upon the background established in the Year One story. So she was actually a dominatrix, and she had a sister, Maggie, who became a nun. So they really go wildly divergent stories, because Maggie and Selina grew up with a very abusive father. I believe the mother committed suicide at a young age, and then the father became an abusive alcoholic, And so the girls were then sent to an orphanage, and Selina was in and out of orphanages, and Maggie decided to seek a higher calling as a way to pay penance for all the things that she had seen and as a way to help those who grew up much like herself, less fortunate. So Selina's pimp Stan attacks Maggie to get to Selina, and Selina kills Stan in revenge. So she's originally a villain. Then she kind of starts operating as an anti-heroine. She's still robbing the rich, but she's more focused on helping those less fortunate. The East End of Gotham is sort of her little area where she operates, much like Daredevil works out of Hell's Kitchen. The East End became Selina's area. And so this was told in the 2001 solo series, started off by Ed Brubaker. Darwin Cook did the first 4 issues on the artwork, and Darwin Cook, rest in peace. He was an absolute legend, and the art on this story is just mwah. The whole arc is amazing, and the art ebbs and flows in quality after that because, I mean, how can you follow Darwin Cook? But it's a really solid read that does a lot to really flesh out Selina as a character. And so she begins this on-again, off-again relationship with Batman, and they learn each other's identities. So then she gets reformed for a period, only to find out that it was due to a mind wipe from Zatanna, and she does not take this well. And we're going to get into that in a little bit. Then, during Infinite Crisis, she becomes a mother. The father is the son of Slam Bradley, who, by the way, I did a little bit of research on Slam because I was like, who the hell is this guy? He shows up as a supporting character in the Catwoman series. Slam Bradley predates Batman and Superman as a character. He showed up in Detective Comics almost a year before Batman did. And then he was just sort of dropped for a very long time until Brubaker brought him back in the early 2000s in the Detective Comics run. So he's this hard-boiled detective, very much a product of the 30s. He's updated a little bit for the later era. He's an older guy. His son, Slam Bradley Jr., is the father for this child. And so Selina leaves the Catwoman identity for a while Holly Robinson takes over. And then she later gives the child Helena up for adoption and returns to being Catwoman. And she takes on a sidekick for a short while. Catgirl is actually the daughter of Carmine Falcone. Catgirl is like dropped after the New 52, and nobody knows anything about her since then, which is very much for the better. So in New 52, her origin story kind of more resembles that of the Michelle Pfeiffer backstory in Batman Returns, and she ends up joining the Justice League for a while. Shocker. Because Steve Trevor vouches for her to Amanda Waller. And so in Rebirth, Catwoman ends up getting blamed for the death of 237 children after her childhood orphanage explodes. Batman says that's not Catwoman's style. There's no way she did that, and helps clear her of the charges. Turns out Holly was actually the one who did it, and Holly was going through some stuff. So Bruce proposes to Selina, and she accepts. And then they go battle Talia al Ghul together in a short storyline that I know made Ariel's head spin. And then Selina leaves Bruce on their wedding day because she believes that making Bruce happy would kill Batman, and Gotham needs Batman more than she needs Bruce. And that she loves him that much that she's willing to make that sacrifice.
Okay.
This is all part of the Tom King run, which you and I have talked at length about how much we love Tom King, but having read a large portion of the run in researching this episode, this is not his best work. There's parts of it that are really good, and it's better than Heroes in Crisis, but I had a conversation with Ariel about that.
Mm-hmm.
It just doesn't seem like Bruce and Selina in these stories. It seems like he
I mean,
created like two different characters and put them in the Batman suit and the Catwoman suit.
Well, I was gonna say everyone loves a good love story, and sometimes they have these twists and turns. It's just you took two iconic characters with very specific personalities and styles that got dropped for the sake of the story.
Yeah. Batman and Selina, and we're going to get into the relationship in just a moment. But I mean, it was so lovey-dovey, and that's not who they are. Like, they had sex on top of diamonds on a rooftop. Like, no. Because first off, from a logistics standpoint, that cannot be comfortable at all. I mean, sex on a rooftop is barely comfortable enough as it is. And then you throw diamonds on top of there, you're basically, and listen, I know they're both into pain, and I'm not necessarily trying to yuck anybody's yum, but that is just, no, man, no. And then, like I said, then they show up in Kiat or wherever Talia is, and Catwoman is like, oh, this is the ex. And it's like, oh, Jesus. As I said recently on Twitter, nobody loves anything as much as Ariel loves Talia. And I know that to see her written this way, like blood was pouring out of Ariel's ears and eyes, I'm sure. But Ariel posted several very, very good questions. So we're going to get into the issues now. And the first question is, why does Selina have such a hard time reforming? And does she even want to reform? And I think this is a very valid question, because Selina as a character over the years has been portrayed in various levels of reformation. At best, I think she's an anti-heroine. At worst, she's a villain. There are lines that I would say she doesn't cross, but she has killed. But she's not I'm going to kill you for the sake of killing. If Catwoman kills you, it's for a reason. So that puts her at odds with somebody like Victor Zsasz, who is next on Ariel's hit list. But Selina reforms for a while, but it never quite seems to stick.
All right. So I'll just jump in and kind of answer the second question before the first one. Does she even want to reform? I think we all can get a better understanding of each other if we go through this one basic premise. A human being, under most conditions, will make the best available decision they have with the information at hand. If you follow that basic premise, then Selina has had a lot of things that have happened to her where, based on anything from random luck to just sheer will to a certain set of skills, she's survived. So by definition, the things that she's done have been successful. I'm making that a question at the end because, of course, there's so many different facets to that and what that means. But the bottom line is she's alive. And if that's the case, then that's the basic premise we have to go with. She did everything that has allowed her to live up to this point. Is there anything that would allow her to do better in terms of survival? I'm going by that premise first because you have to add on the other layers afterwards. I'm going through Maslow here. So after that, what does she need? Does she have a roof over her head? Does she have food on the table? Does she have the means to continue to provide those things? Does she have emotional supports? Does she have the ability to think that she's doing something that is for the greater good of society? All of these things. We'll get into that into the other issues, but on the most basic level, she can really start checking off a lot of these boxes. And therefore, how much motivation would she have to change things? The negative consequences that she suffered, has she lost relationships? Has she lost important people in her life? Yes. Has she had negative consequences such as punishment for the things that have happened to her? Yes. Be they punitive through the legal system, be it just personal people saying, no, I don't think you should be doing this. Whatever. So there may not be as much motivation unless it's a situation where the consequence is ongoing. So it's not just to bring it to the real world. It's not just whether or not you want to stop doing something you've already done. It's if you do not stop this and continue to stop doing this, be it a habit or be it a previous behavior or a set of emotional traits that have led to negative consequences, then you're going to continue to have said punishment. If you're on probation or if you're on parole, that's a huge factor that'll allow you to start considering whether or not you need to quote unquote reform. So that's the first part. And I'm not saying that to belittle anybody that says, well, I don't even need that. I'll do it myself. Like, okay, great. Excellent. Not everybody operates that way. I'm just saying it's broad. Now, why does Selina have such a hard time reforming? I think that's, I think that gets down to something much more basic. Because reforming implies that there is something wrong that needs to be corrected. If you have a habit that you want to eliminate, or you want to create a habit that you don't have, those things are not something you are just able to complete in a week. Those are lifelong things that are going to ebb and flow. Nobody, I don't care who you are, you can be the best in the world at something. Nobody is perfect with any one given habit. That's what makes it a habit. It's something that's repeated and something that's done consistently enough that even when it's not at its absolute best, or you're not at your top form, or other things are going on, you're still able to get something done. Selina has quite a few things that you could consider to be habits, some of which are beneficial, some of which may be detrimental. But either way, for all of us, it's not a moral failing to say that we have habits that are hard to break, or we have habits we want to start and we're having difficulty starting them. I'm not excluding myself either. So the idea of why? Well, because if we could just do it that simply, then they wouldn't be called habits. They would be called things that we automatically do every day on a rote program schedule and don't even have to think about because there's no other added benefit or detriment. Like that doesn't flow off the tongue, but it's still the same point. That's not what a habit is. A habit is the idea that you have taken something that is absolutely necessary that if you don't do, it's not going to create the desired result. And that type of forethought requires so much upfront energy that if you don't build it the right way, then you're going to end up dropping it pretty quick. And that's just basic habits. I'm talking about the idea of getting up and exercising 3 times a week. I can't imagine the idea of saying, by the way, even though you've shown that you're one of the best thieves to ever live, we want you to get rid of that and just do something else and take up the rest of your time and emotional energy and your thought process and completely adapt it to other walks of life that, by the way, usually don't incorporate direct stealing in them. Kind of a cliff when it comes to the thought there.
Well, I think the question was just about the fact that, and we're going to get into this in a moment, but that she has a particular set of skills, to borrow a phrase from Liam Neeson, and that if she used them for good, then she wouldn't constantly have to be worrying about being chased. She wouldn't have to worry about the threat of law enforcement. She wouldn't have to worry about the potential impacts on her life and the threats to her life, because every time she goes out and steals, she's risking death. And so I think Ariel's question was more, is there a path for Selina that involves using these skills that doesn't endanger her? But frankly, my reading of Selina and with the copious amount of Catwoman and Batman books that I've read this week in preparation for this episode, she's an adrenaline junkie. I think that's at least part of it. It's the thrill of the chase. It's the thrill of the steal. So the reforming would potentially take that away from her, and she may be able to give it up for a while. And she did that with Helena, but she reaches a point where she's a junkie. She's a thrill junkie in some respects, not like some of the other characters we've done, But I do think that there is an aspect to her character that is focused on that. And that's why she keeps going back to it, because nothing is going to make her feel as good as the thrill she gets from breaking in and stealing diamonds. Even if she feels good in her soul about helping people, and again, we're going to get into that in a second, that nothing else can match that high. And so she's an addict. She's addicted to the stealing. She's addicted to it.
Well, I think that ties into the next question, and I'm glad you brought it up that way. I agree with you, by the way. I don't have a disagreement there at all.
So the next question then is, why does she steal?
Yeah. You hit on the first part, that there's definitely an emotional attachment to it. I'm going to take this opportunity, because I don't do it that often, where I'm going to get into a specific diagnosis, which, once again, these are fictional characters. I have no way of truly making a diagnosis. And I'm not even implying that the diagnosis I'm going over fits this particular character perfectly. I'm just simply using it as a great thought exercise, because I feel like that's what I enjoy it. And doggone it, if I enjoy it, you guys are going to get exposed to it, because I got to keep this interesting for myself. Kleptomania. Sometimes people throw that word around. I may not even recognize that there really is a DSM diagnosis for it. So I'm just going to go ahead and read them off a little bit. It's quick. Recurrent impulses to steal and instances of stealing objects that are not needed for personal use or financial gain. Feeling increased tension right before the theft. Feeling pleasure, gratification, or relief at the time of the theft. Thefts are not committed in response to delusions or hallucinations or as expressions of revenge or anger. Thefts cannot be explained by antisocial personality disorder, conduct disorder, or a manic episode. The age of onset is variable, can begin in childhood, adolescence, or adulthood, and in rare cases, late adulthood. So the reason why I wanted to go over that is it's kind of a setup to just discuss what's going on with Selina. No, I don't think that all of this matches, because there are very clear times, and some of her origin indicates that this was a direct result of trying to resolve emotional tension, direct anger, direct frustration, the idea that the world is unfair, sense of injustice. All of that plays in. And if you have an opportunity to alter that, get some sort of revenge, yeah, then that would explain it. But here's the other thing, and I hinted at it already. She's good at it. We enjoy doing things that we're good at and provide emotional pleasure. You combine those two things, then you're probably going to continue to do that thing. Other consequences be darned, because that is one of the greatest things that a human can experience. The idea that you have the combination of being good and getting rewarded from it emotionally. And then on top of that, she's making a living off of this. She can actually bankroll herself this way. Are you kidding me? As long as she doesn't get caught, which once again, though, is considered a part of the skill set. We wouldn't have many stories if she never got caught. But you got to think, depending on how often she's doing these things, like she's got it down pat. So you just added up all the things that in theory would not want her to change any of it, because, once in a while you may get in trouble, but what happens? Does she get bailed out? I'm not talking about like the money bail. I'm talking like when you have the type of people she hangs around with, you might start to think that I can pretty much just keep doing this whenever I want. So that's a huge part of this. Now, in terms of going back to kleptomania a little bit, should it even be its own diagnosis? There's been consideration in the past that that's way too specific. The idea that it's something that you focus on intently, and even when it gets above and beyond needing to do it, because Selina, relatively speaking, could live a comfortable life and still does these things. Now we're getting into the idea of, well, how often do these thoughts really start to get into your mind? How much do you plan? How often do you plan these things? Does it matter whether or not you even get caught? Do you even get kind of a thrill from the idea of being caught now? Does that change things? This is a woman with a sex work industry background. I'm putting a gentle spin on it, but the point is there, the idea that there's some sort of gratification in the idea that you might actually get slight punishment from it. I know you mentioned the idea of Bruce and Selina kind of doing some things that relate to pain and still having pleasure in that circumstance. So there's a lot of branches to this. The idea, though, that if it's taking up so much of her life at the expense of everything else, forget kleptomania, is that obsession. There's a possibility. It mentions that the other exclusionary criteria, is this a matter of based on all the trauma, abuse, and everything else that she's had? Is that a response where she's trying to regain some level of control? That's a possibility. There's so many branches to go with this, but I figured let's start with the most basic one, because that one purely focuses on stealing. And then when you start to expand a bit, you realize, okay, we can't just pigeonhole this. We have to really make sure we look at the entire litter box.
Boo. Boo this man.
What can I say, man?
You're supposed to save your puns to the end.
If I did that, then it would just be like a 10-minute writer at the end of the episode.
No, and I know we said there was going to be tons of cat puns in this episode. So Ariel has 4 questions, so I want to breeze through them so that we can cover them, because there is another one that I do want to discuss. But she has a habit of taking in orphans, and I don't know that this one requires that much analysis. It's because she grew up in an orphanage and she understands, and so I think it's that part of her that wants to give back. And we see that a lot in the Brubaker series, is that she's really focused on trying to help these kids. She really takes care of Holly. Holly is one of the only people that really, truly knows Selina deep down. But I think...
Hey, man, that's
classic. I'm not the mental health professional here, but she grew up in an orphanage. She had a really bad go of it. She's trying to help out others.
Yeah. To see one is to know one is to love one. Lifting as you climb. That's classic, and it's a great thing, and it's something that more people need to do in life. No question. I'll just make that as like a great public statement to say. I don't know. I don't know how much I have to add to that, only for the sake of getting this out there, because now it's stuck in my head. The only thing she didn't do was, establish the first private orphanage in Gotham City.
It has been a while since you've made a Hamilton reference, so I appreciate that you threw that in there. So Ariel's last question, because I do want to get into one that I didn't throw into the show notes, so it's just going to kind of keep you on your toes. But Ariel's question is, after Selina was reformed because Zatanna brainwashed her into doing so, and she didn't respond well, what kind of effect does that have on her perception of herself and her role in Gotham? That and this sort of goes back to what we were discussing earlier, the only way I can be good is if I am mind wiped and a portion of me is erased. That's something that you didn't really talk on too much in the first part.
I will, I may be bastardizing this a little bit, and I apologize, but I will give a similarity to something that I actually get very commonly with patients. And a real clear one that I'll get is ECT for someone with severe depression. Not to get into the weeds of that, but the point is, it's a non-invasive, non-surgical, but anesthetic procedure where you receive electric stimulation to your brain, and it invokes basically a temporary seizure for a matter of a few seconds even, but you don't experience it because you're unconscious. You're under anesthesia. So the whole point is, the number one side effect of that is temporary short-term memory loss. And after the fact, patients sometimes have said, I can't believe that I've had to go this far to get this result. As if, I don't know, there's a certain sense of self-worth that if you go about things a certain way, one path is considered the proper path, and anything that you don't do that way is somehow wrong or immoral or evil. I know it sounds like I'm exaggerating, but I get this feedback from patients sometimes that they say, well, why couldn't I have just taken that antidepressant and been fine? Or why couldn't I have just gone to therapy? I should have been okay like everybody else. And the truth is there is no right or wrong. It's only what works for you. I'll tell you what's wrong with this was there was no consent. That's the issue.
Yep.
That is the super messed up thing about this. And by the way, if anybody knows that story with what Zatanna did, and let's not forget the other people that were there. And let's not forget that she did this not just to Catwoman. She did it to some big name players, including one that Catwoman knows. Oh boy. And that actually does not get short shrift. The idea that, who was it? Was it, oh my God. It was Light and then it was Batman. Those are the two that I know as well.
Yep.
But the point is, that actually creates a massive storyline in and of itself because no one really gets forgiven with what happened with that. So in that sense, why does that affect someone? Well, because that's a matter of agency. That's the idea that as a human being, you have a certain right to things for yourself, that if you say no, people are going to respect that. When it comes to treatment, we toe a fine line. I'll admit that. There are times where we give people medications against their will because they're considered an immediate threat, an immediate danger to themselves or to others. And we consider that to be okay. But something like I mentioned ECT, or there are other procedures, any surgery, things like that. If someone says no, there is a very clear definition that we have to accept that. We do not just immediately say, well, guess what? You're getting it anyway. We do not do that. And the idea that Zatanna, in this case, is a part of a hero team that is supposed to be looking out for the good of other people, including those that she's supposed to respect around her, that's no different than the healthcare system. If we didn't have this level of ethics, ignoring that and doing that to other people. And unfortunately, and I hate to say it, but it's the truth. The history of psychiatry, the history of psychology, we messed up a few times in history, and we did do harm. And it's something that I have to acknowledge. And there have been several apologies about it. And I'm grateful that I now practice in an era where I think we're doing much better. And we're still trying to continue to get better. So how does that mess someone up? You basically said, we don't care about you in the way that we should. When you say that to someone and you're supposed to be in a position not just of power, but you're supposed to be in a position of healing, a position of grace, a position of safety, and you violate that trust, then you're basically asking the person, once that has gone, once that is passed, you're asking them to find that trust in someone else at that level again. Someone like Selina that's gone through everything that she has, you're asking her to go through that again. No questions asked? Highly unlikely.
Wow. I was not expecting such a passionate response from you in response to that question. But given the nature of what it was you were discussing, I can't say that I blame you. So as I have nothing more to add to that, I'm going to just segue to the last question, which is a very, very big question. But why does she love Bruce?
Because she's a cat. And sometimes you take 2 steps forward, I take 2 steps back. We come together because opposites attract. What?
Oh
why are you so surprised?
God,
why are you surprised? Why are you surprised? Why? Look,
you know, there was an entire MC Scat Cat album.
Okay, I didn't need to know that. But to get back to the point.
And I know in the Tom King book, there's this, he catches me when I fall. She catches me when I fall.
No. Don't. I don't want to get into that. Here's what I'm saying. So much of commonalities involve the things sometimes that we don't recognize. You have 2 people that are acting outside of the typical purview of the law that have significant problems with other people that are doing horrible things in the world. And they have an opportunity to influence those things with incredible combination of cunning intelligence and athletic and fighting prowess around the same time, because it's almost always at night the way these things are set up, and are going to be running in the same circles. So there's way more familiarity than you think. It's just that on the surface, You just look at the disparity of what they say they stand for. But when you get to the grassroots of it, if you go to the same place, you work in the same environment, you have, very similar day-to-day activities that are going to put you in proximity to one another. I know I led with that song because I just thought it would be a funny thing to do, but it's more than that. It's that you get the opportunity to create a basic level of understanding with one another. And then you get all of these other experiences because, let's be honest, be it fighting or be it talking passionately or debating or any of those other things, emotions do get involved. And when you do that, sometimes the emotions aren't just adversarial. If there is that commonality and you actually find things that you enjoy about that other person, then yes, that bond can be created. And it doesn't have to be this super artificial thing. It doesn't have to be wacky. It doesn't have to be so dramatic, but it still happens. And it's just as organic as anything else that happens when it comes to love of two strangers. So I don't see that as that out of the realm of possibility. It's great. It's great to read. It's great to see on the screen when it's been in motion pictures. It's been great in animated series. I love it. The thing that I think and I don't mean to put words in your mouth, but what I was getting at with the criticism of Tom King was that doesn't mean that it automatically morphs into what we, quote unquote, look at as Hollywood love. It doesn't have to be that. They still have those prickly sides, those thorns that don't mesh. And because of that, there is always this distance. There's always this tension. And that's the tension between the two that leads to continued frustration by both of them. And I'm not trying to make this sound Freudian or anything of the sort. I'm saying that when you continue to have that tension, you end up in circumstances that are never going to be dull. They're always going to have to find a way to use that energy one way or another emotionally. Sometimes it's going to be in favor of each other. Sometimes it's going to be against each other. And yet, because they've had those conversations, they know that there's more to it than just, oh, you steal. I hate stealing. I got to fight you. Comes down to way more than that. And they're willing to look past that point and willing to continue to have some sort of relationship. I'm not saying it always has to be romantic, but it has been at that point. And as with real life, it may ebb and flow. And that's totally okay.
That answers my question then. All right, let's take a short break. We get back, we'll get into treatment. Stay tuned.
Greetings and salutations. This is Cage's Kiss, the ultimate Cage cast, where we discuss the movies and life of the national treasure, Nick Cage.
There are three of us here, and I can't help but notice that none of us are Nicolas Cage. Did nobody call him?
What? A Cage cast with no Nick Cage?
No, instead of being Nicolas Cage, we're three Nicolas Cage experts, which is the next best thing.
I don't think we should admit to being experts.
Too late.
We are not experts at anything. We are not life coaches, and we are not in any way, shape, or form qualified to give you suggestions on life choices.
But Nick Cage is, and he's made hundreds of life choices.
Seriously, I cannot stress enough just how much you should not take our advice.
But we're experts.
No, seriously, we're not experts.
Yes, but we will be reviewing his first acting gig as Nicholas Coppola, Best of Times, which features a young and very precious Crispin Glover.
And his work in Fast Times at Ridgemont High.
And his work in My Nightmares.
We're experts.
Hey, this is Ken M.
Padawan J.
Coach Duffy.
From the Ocho Duro Parlay Hour podcast. Every week, the ODPH is talking sports, movies, TV, comics, and more. It's always a parlay of topics on each episode. You can find the ODPH on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Spotify, Stitcher, Podbean, and wherever you find great podcasts, such as the one you're listening to right now. Don't forget to check out OchoDuroParlayHour.com, where you can find the links to all of the ODPH social media accounts, links to the bands whose music you hear each week on the show, hashtag 607 podcast info, and parlay points, our companion blog section of the show. Thanks for listening to the ODPH. Now get back to your regularly scheduled podcast.
Hi, I'm Gail Simone, and you're listening to Capes on the Couch.
And we're back. So treatment in universe for Selina Kyle.
Oh dear.
First, lock up all your stuff.
Of course. Except that's actually the entire premise. This is in any other world, but since we're in a comics world, I'll go with it. I'm essentially setting up some really good heists. And what I mean by that is there may not be anything to steal, but she has to think that there are things to steal. And as she's doing it and as she's trying to figure out everything from the security systems to all these different things, the things that she's stealing are actually different activities. They're different puzzles, emotional puzzles. You know, the only way that she is actually going to be able to get some of these things solved is to admit things to herself that she never did before. There are some ways to encrypt things online that we don't think about. Bitcoin at this point has blown the lid off of everything in terms of what encryption is expected to do. And the point is, you can make keys really simple. They don't have to be like 36 letter and number strings. You can make them as simple as, what is the most important value in your life? You can have the person answer, who's the one person that you wish hadn't left your life at this point? You can make them things that she doesn't have to be a cryptologist. She doesn't need Oracle. She doesn't need Bruce. She doesn't need any of that stuff. But those sorts of things, almost similar to if anybody's read, what's that book by Dan Brown that everybody knows? Doggone it. Not Angels and Demons, Da Vinci Code, where just these little puzzles, simple phrases. I want to get her mind going with the types of things that she hasn't considered in her life in a long time. Because I think until she does that, she's going to have these continued impulses. I'm not going to call them compulsions. I'm not making that diagnosis. But she's going to continue to have this thing about stealing and doing it in a way that gives her that thrill. And if I can start to desensitize that and just have her reconnect with that part of her, I think she might actually want to do a lasting reform, because she may recognize, I don't have to go about things the way I have been for the longest time. I don't have to be the person I was. I don't have to relive abuse. I don't have to go through all the negatives, but I can start to ingratiate myself with the idea that my way is not the only way.
Okay. I like that.
Think of me as the benevolent white hat Riddler.
Huh. The benevolent white hat Riddler. I like it. I like it. So now out of universe, we've got somebody who had a difficult childhood, to put it mildly, has focused on survival and is in an on-off relationship with maybe a vice cop, or something along those lines. What are some of the key things that we can focus on to help them?
Well, first off, I just want to point out, as you've said, and with Selina, the character, too, I find it impressive, and I think it's important to note that what you've gone through and what you've experienced, while it's a part of your history, it doesn't have to define everything about you. Selina, clearly, as you said, has survived, and I know I said it too, but more than that, it's clear that she's developed who she is regardless of that. And helping a person recognize that can be so critical. And for some people, it may sound like, well, Doc, you were just talking about getting her to know her background and acknowledging. And I say, yes, but there's a difference between acknowledgement and acceptance. She accepted it a long time ago. But the idea that these things are going to continue to come up, that there's still going to be suffering in the world, and that there's still other things that are happening that are not necessarily in your direct control. Trying to grasp onto that is going to usually create more problems. So the idea that you have your own system, you have your own way of handling things from an emotional standpoint that are going to lead to you having a more fulfilled life, and you don't have to do it in a way that adds to previous vices, I think that's a wonderful thing. I think that's a great way to go. And the important thing for any therapist is to not lay shame Because what ends up happening sometimes, just human nature, no matter how well trained or how experienced we all are with this, when you talk about doing something that you think, even personally, you may think is morally wrong, you do not automatically infuse that into the situation with the other person, because that's an instant way to have them shut down on you. Because now you're just like everybody else that's ever doubted them or just wants to automatically throw them away. And that's not the intent. The focus is, and this actually has been said probably more eloquently than I'm saying, sometimes the goal of dealing with a thief, depending on what the emotional circumstance is to temporarily make them a better thief. You allow them to recognize the things that are positive and what they do well, so that they can build on that and work on things that are causing harm. So first is, what is your goal in the long run? Has nothing to do with money, has nothing to do with power. Even if those things are what you want, what do you want for your relationships? What do you want for your emotional experience? What do you want for your anxiety levels? Do you want to sleep better? Do you want to feel less pain? Those types of goals are different for someone who hasn't really experienced it that way, because their experience is the reduction of the things that are going to kill them. They're usually pretty good with that. Now I'm saying, what are things that are going to help you extend those 9 lives?
And there's another one.
Sorry.
It's okay. I should have come to expect it at this point. Yeah,
there's a difference between just saying, I don't want to die, which, to be honest, for the past year, a lot of us have been thinking, and I want to live a better life for myself and for the people around me.
That's absolutely the case. And I don't think anybody's disputing that there is a difference between I don't want to die and I want to live. But I do think it's important that we focus on the statement that you made at the beginning, that you are not your background. You are not the circumstances of your birth. You are not the circumstances of your upbringing. You have potential beyond that. You have capabilities beyond that. And that to limit yourself to just saying, well, I grew up in an abusive household, or, well, my father did this, or my mother did that, or whatever your past may be, to limit your definition of yourself to that is to do a disservice to what you can become. So with that being said, we're going to get all of this wrapped up in a bow. And with the help of our friend Kate from Ignorance Was Bliss, we're going to get Selina Kyle on Dr. Issues' couch.
Hello, Miss Kyle. I'm Dr. Issues.
Hello, doctor. Which are you? A psychiatrist or a psychologist?
Oh, I'm a psychiatrist. That means
you're going to look at this from a medical perspective, because you're going to try and treat a disease. I'm aware. In that case, I'm fine. I don't have any medical conditions that ibuprofen won't help. I don't have amnesia. I'm not suicidal. I'm not depressed or anxious. And I don't think you're stupid enough to think I'm homicidal.
All right. So you've been put through these places before. What would you have said if I were a psychologist or maybe a social worker?
If you were a psychologist, I would have said something similar, because that's how all of you start. But maybe I would have thrown in, I'm not interested in any mommy or daddy issues. If you were a social worker, I would have asked if you needed me to pay for lunch, because you're underpaid.
Wow. That's efficiently touching on all stereotypes. I guess this is the part where I'm supposed to be offended and cut the session off, but I like verbal sparring.
So you want to drag this out? Okay. Tell me something I don't already know about myself.
Ooh, I get to try out a new variation of the same question. What's the one thing you're afraid to deny yourself?
I don't understand the question.
Well, when do you tell yourself no?
Whenever I feel like it.
Really? I do my homework and I see quite the record here.
You're talking about material gains? Oh, come on. I'm not petty just because they label some things as petty theft. That's just what I'm good at.
So it's not just a compulsion to steal? Or is it an obsession to figure out how to get the job done?
Ah, now OCD and OCPD questions. Typical. No, I don't have rituals about my heists. I don't lose sleep over taking what amounts to 0.1% of a multimillionaire mobster's net worth. And yes, if I knew it would directly cause harm to someone innocent or someone I cared about, I would find a way to make things work out. Are you finished?
I'm not trying to do this in a paint by numbers approach, but you clearly have an objective to prove that you have nothing worth working on.
Not with you. Don't take it personally.
Like I said, I never do. Wait, does that mean you want to work on something with someone personal instead?
I'm not sure what that means either.
Oh, that's stalling. You thought I'd just get frustrated and, chalk you up as hopeless. Who do you want to help you?
I can't say.
I don't buy it. You had every angle covered because you had to do these assessments a million times before. I mean, I'll admit, I got lucky and I took a shot in the dark, but now it's pretty obvious. We're in uncharted territory. Is it another professional?
In a way.
Okay, I'll refer you to them. As long as it's not a family member or really close acquaintance.
Oh.
Then I have to admit, there's a significant ethical consideration on my part. I mean, I've seen this too many times. There's nothing wrong with having a strong support system. But please be careful and do not use them as a substitute for therapy. It'll drain you both.
Don't I know it? I drain his bank account. He drains my will to steal. But we go so well together. I already made him step away from me, but sometimes I want to step back into his life as if nothing ever happened. And when we have to work together, I feel it. Nothing changed. Nothing ever changes. Different variations, but it always turns out the same. Do your medications fix that? How do you treat facts of life, doctor?
I don't. I don't treat life. Your experiences are your own. Whatever love you had, it was real. Whatever pain remains, it's excruciating. I'm sure. Look, if you're filling a void by taking from others, you've probably heard it a bajillion times by now, okay? So I'll drop it. But what I hope you don't drop is the idea that putting all your eggs in one close basket may come back to haunt you and leave you susceptible to blind spots. I don't think like you. Many people don't. Treat that as a strength for once in your life rather than a weakness.
People think differently than me because people don't learn how to get back at those that hurt them. How many orphans get to make it? How many ladies of the night don't live to see sunrise? You combine everything, you get me. That's fine. Sometimes I really do think I have 9 lives.
What number are you on now?
You never know.
You're back to that act again?
Sorry, doctor, but just because you touched a nerve doesn't mean you get to play it like a fiddle. Besides, aren't these sessions supposed to be time limited to ensure I know the proper sense of professional boundaries? I have another appointment across town. Some sort of secret shipment coming through that I don't want to miss? Guess I'm just trying to mask my own securities toward my lifetime aggressors through mindless shopping.
Wait, what? You're announcing your...
Oh, and getting out some other tension too, perhaps. Anyway, gotta run. I don't know if this was helpful or not, but at least you got me to think about something new.
All right. Well, I guess I can take some time to clean my desk. Hey. Hey, wait a minute. That was limited edition.
Well then, you just have to work your tail off to get your paws on another one.
Oh, that pun was perfect.
So what did she steal from you?
Wouldn't you like to know?
I would.
Yeah, I'm sure you would, but I'm not telling you. That was the point. I was trying to be coy, but I guess because, the way Selina's written as from a guy who was a very misogynistic male, he had to present it that way. Wow, we never got into that part either.
No, we didn't. I mean, but that's the joy of a character that has been around for 70, 80 years, is we could go on, but this episode would be another 3-hour one. And we don't want another hour and a half job like the Clones episode. Thank you again to Kate from Ignorance is Bliss. Check her out at iwbpodcast.com. She's fantastic. I guested on an episode a while back, and will be guesting on another episode coming up soon. She's delightful and hilarious and just a wonderful person. I'm so glad to have met her through all of the podcasting world. So recommended reading for this episode is the Catwoman series from 2001 by Ed Brubaker. Really the first 4 issues with the Darwin Cook art, as I said at the beginning, is just, it's astounding. But the whole series is, I think, really, really good. And so check that out if you want to get Selina and her cast of supporting characters and not just Selina as a character in Batman's world. Batman does appear naturally, but it's much more Selina focused. And it is also the first series, at least that I've been able to figure out, where her outfit changes from cat inspired to much more tactical. She loses the tail. She gets the big goggles that are like night vision type. And it's much more of a stealth suit. And it's really, really cool from a visual perspective. So I would highly recommend that. So upcoming episodes, surprise, surprise. We have held off on this one until we've officially booked it. But our next episode is another creator interview, which we are very excited to announce. We will be talking to Philip Kennedy Johnson, who has done several creator-owned books, Kill a Man and Last Sons of America. He is also working for DC on the Superman series. He is the new Superman writer, taking over for Brian Michael Bendis. And he is going to be writing a series based on Alien, the film franchise, for Marvel. So we're going to talk to him about his old stuff, and we're going to hype up some of his upcoming books. So very, very psyched for that one. And we have Ariel to thank for that, because he started talking to her to thank her for a review that she did for Kill a Man. And then one thing led to another, and she's like, hey, you need to talk to Capes on the Couch. And so she sort of hooked us up. So many, many thanks to Ariel for that. And then Lavanna Blackburn. And then Superman Red Sun, as selected by Brian as his last patron selection. And we've got another 5-star review to read. Fab. This was awesome. These two definitely know what they are talking about and provide a unique view on their topics. And so that one comes from William Glasser, who heads the Substantiate podcast. You can check him out at substantiatepod.com. So thank you, William, for that awesome review. And you can find us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at Capes on the Couch. Our website is now capesonthecouch.com. And email us, capesonthecouch@gmail.com, as we said at the top of the show, with a voice message. We're working on trying to see if we can set up a Google Voice number so you can leave us a voicemail. But send us a voice message on Batman, your memories of the character, what Batman and his mythos means to you. If you grew up watching the animated series, you grew up on the Nolan trilogy, if your first experience was the Burton film, comics, whatever you want to talk about Batman, and we will be using that in an upcoming episode. So just as the lawyer in me wants to be sure that if you send us the voice message via email at capesonthecouch@gmail.com, you give us permission to publish that in the episode or in an episode, which again, we'll have a little more details coming up. So that's going to do it for me. Doc, anything you want to add?
Oh man.
Let me guess. Sorry. The cat got your tongue.
You said it, not me.
Yeah, I know. I walked into that one. For Doc Issues, I'm Anthony Sitko. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next week.
Capes on the Couch podcast is for entertainment purposes only. Dr. Issues is a psychiatrist, but he is not your psychiatrist and does not have knowledge of your individual situation. For any personal mental health concerns, please consult your own healthcare providers. For medical emergencies, please call 911 or the designated number in your area immediately. Remember that you are not alone and help is out there.